Hello, Tidelift Upstream. Welcome to Lessons from Offering Paid Support for Open Source Projects. So I'm Valeri Karpov. I've been the maintainer of Mongoose since 2014. I'm also the CEO of Meanit Software, a small dev shop that works on Mongoose and helps clients succeed with Mongoose. And I've been a Tidelift lifter for Mongoose since 2018. So first, a little bit about Mongoose. Mongoose is a broadly featured ODM, similar to an ORM, but for document databases, specifically for Node.js and MongoDB. Mongoose has been around for a very long time, since first released in 2010. Went through a couple of maintainers before I took over the project in April 2014. And right now, the project currently gets about 2 million downloads a week, and according to GitHub, is used by about 3 million public GitHub repos. So it's a very popular project. Brief bit of context about me and how I work with Tidelift and Mongoose. According to Tidelift, I'd be what's called a semi-professional maintainer. So I derive some income from working on Mongoose. However, I supplement that with application development using Mongoose, specifically building and maintaining applications for clients. And recently, or in 2022, we added a pro support subscription for Mongoose. We started that in 2022, shortly after I was laid off from my last day job. So quick little bit about the Mongoose Pro subscription. Mongoose Pro subscription is available on GitHub sponsors as well as paid directly through Stripe. We offer two tiers, $69 a month for support, and $199 a month for support, 2 job board slots, and access to subscriber-only software, which we haven't been able to find good subscriber-only software yet. So that's still a work in progress. So the Mongoose Pro subscription is the primary service it provides is support, a shared Slack channel where you can ask maintainers questions, and priority support on GitHub issues. So every time a subscriber opens a new issue on GitHub, they automatically get a priority label, so that jumps to the front of our queue. So how things are going with the Mongoose Pro subscription? Not bad. We're making some money off of it, not a huge amount. When we first launched in 2022, we took about 20 to 30 sales calls and converted 6 clients, which is a pretty good conversion rate. But that was because we already knew kind of which clients we wanted to reach out to and which ones were pretty warm or not. We've put minimal work in since the initial launch, just trying to help our existing clients succeed while not focusing too much on growing. But well, slow and steady, we'll get there. We'll keep on growing. So first, just to clarify also what kind of support we typically provide. As you'll see, this is different from the type of support that Tidelift typically provides. So typically, the questions that we get are usually Slack channel or usually based in Slack. And we get things like quick questions about, hey, are we doing this right? Is this code going to blow up on us in production? We get some bug fixes in our Slack channels as well, or requests for bug fixes, rather. Questions about like, hey, here's this code that we wrote. It doesn't seem to work. Can you fix this, or can you explain why it doesn't work? And also, we frequently get requests for new features. Clients often say, hey, we've been using this pattern quite frequently in our code for a long time. It seems to work great. You want to add it to Mongoose Core? And we often say yes. As a matter of fact, we've probably added about 4 or 5 features over the last year and change that have been directly requested by our pro subscribers. So some lessons that we've learned from working with this Mongoose Pro subscription. Number one, in terms of getting new clients, is to go for small to medium businesses. Our existing clients are typically smaller businesses that most haven't heard of. They're not household names or Fortune 500 companies. Mongoose is used at some pretty large companies with pretty substantial budgets. Couple that we've gotten recently are from Cisco and from Atlassian. And initially we thought that, oh, okay, like we should try to get support subscriptions with these bigger companies because they have huge budgets. But that hasn't proven to work out as well as we would hope. Um, Mostly because, well, at small to medium businesses, the CEO or CTO may use Mongoose in their day to day. So people that have budget and are able to actually have the authority to put down a corporate card are using Mongoose on a regular basis, and they can actually kind of feel the benefit from this pro subscription. Whereas at bigger companies, like at the Fortune 500 companies, um, the CTO, the technology executives, they're typically not coding on a day-to-day basis, and they're also typically looking at at things from a much higher level. They're typically looking at uh, several different languages, dozens of different frameworks. Um, just have be getting the visibility as one small open source project at the executive level at these big companies is very difficult. An idea that I had for these larger companies to take advantage of some of these open source project support tiers. And the problem ends up being that developers at these companies typically don't have a corporate card. They don't have any budget for software purchases, and they could really benefit greatly from these open source support tiers because they're typically switching between different projects, oftentimes with tight deadlines. Being able to ask for help from an expert on Mongoose or an expert on Vue or an expert on Express would really help them get their job done faster. And I figure many companies already have a learning budget. There are some companies that offer up to $1,000 a year for employees to spend on courses, books, conferences, things for them to learn and grow. So why not have an open source support budget where your employees can access, say, a small budget every year in order to access access paid support tiers that are much smaller, kind of small paid support tiers, $9 a month for open source projects that they use. So like if you're a developer working on a new project in Vue, you don't know Vue very well, maybe you sign up for a support tier to talk directly to a member of the Vue core team and ask them for help on getting started. Another thing that we learned is it actually ended up being a lot less support than we thought. Um, when I was afraid to launch this pro support tier because honestly I was quite afraid of being inundated with support requests. We already get a lot of issues on GitHub. I didn't want to add to that. But the reality is that most clients are quiet for months at a time. So we're not drinking from the fire hose here. Um, we get occasional bursts of activity around upgrades, corporate changes, and just general changes or end of quarter things like that are times when we often get bursts of activity. But for the most part, everything runs smoothly, and our Slack channels are quiet. So if you're an open source maintainer that's worried about providing a paid support tier because you're worried about being inundated with support requests, my advice would be don't worry about that. Mongoose already gets probably dozens of GitHub issues per day from people who don't pay. So the paid support requests have so far been just a tiny drop in the bucket, almost unnoticeable relative to our existing workload of GitHub issues. And one thing we found is we were a little afraid that customers would have a really high bar, kind of expect us to turn around issues almost immediately because they were paying us. And the reality has kind of been the opposite. The paying customers are usually more pleasant and more understanding, and usually the hostile bug reports come from people who don't pay. I think another thing we've learned in that vein is that some of our clients just want to say thanks for and make sure that Mongoose is continues to be well maintained. And sometimes we go months without support requests from clients, and we worry that we aren't providing enough value to our clients. However, we've found that most of our clients aren't really looking to get every last drop of ROI they can out of the Mongoose Pro subscription. they're often just looking to say thanks, make sure the project is well maintained. They already get a lot of value out of the Mongoose itself, which is free and open source and always will be. Another thing that we've learned is our clients really love Slack. By far, our client's favorite feature, or the most used feature rather, is being able to message a maintainer directly. So we have a Slack Pro workspace that lets us use shared channels. And so in our Pro workspace, we have shared channels with each of our clients, Pro-client name. And that channel is shared in the client's workspace. So the client can communicate with maintainers directly. Client can invite their own developers into the channel in order to help them communicate directly with maintainers. I think the big thing there is that our clients are much more comfortable sharing their code in Slack versus in GitHub, and with good reason. GitHub issues are public. Slack is relatively private, and it also kind of with the shared workspace, it kind of feels like the Mongoose maintainers are part of your team, because it's just another channel in your Slack workspace where you can just share information just with the Mongoose maintainers. I think it also benefits from having a more conversational tone. Again, on GitHub, we have a pretty strict issue template. So in order to file a new bug report on the Mongoose GitHub issues, you have to go in and fill out a bunch of information, check some boxes, enter in your current version of Mongoose, current version of Node, et cetera, et cetera. In Slack, you can have a more conversational tone where you can just quickly ask a question and say, hey, there's this thing that's going wrong. I'm getting this error message, and you can usually get a faster response. So, and I've really liked this whole Slack approach, because I think it's really helped me get back to something that makes open source really great, which is kind of being able to communicate directly, or direct relationships between the people that are working on software and the people that are using the software. I love GitHub issue templates. They really help out when you get dozens and dozens of bug reports a day like we do. But on the other hand, like filling out a GitHub issue template is just like filling out a form, and who likes filling out forms, right? Having this like casual, direct relationship where you can ask a question, get a response, has really been refreshing, and it's really helped us both kind of get better feedback from our clients more directly. Kind of helped us improve the way that we work on Mongoose, and also helped us provide better, more direct feedback to our customers on how they can use Mongoose better. I think that's really a big part of what makes open source great. Again, being able to talk one-on-one. Now the question is, so how is this different from Tidelift? Are people already paying Tidelift for Mongoose support? And I think we're talking about different types of support. So Tidelift subscribers, or at least in my experience, don't really ask for help with Mongoose directly. I think Tidelift is more about providing less deep support on each individual project, but kind of support on a wide range of projects. And in many ways, I think Tidelift is a better option for most open source projects. Again, the direct support tier has worked for some projects. It's worked okay for Mongoose, and I think, well, I hope that more projects we will offer direct support tiers in the future. I think it's a great way to monetize open source projects, and I think it's an opportunity that many people have not taken advantage of. But in many ways, I think Tidelift works better for open source as a whole. Primary reason, I think, is that Tidelift is much better at selling to enterprises. Enterprise sales is very difficult. There's a reason why there are people out there that are career enterprise salesmen, and there are people out there that have spent years trying to break into the enterprise sales game. As a solo maintainer, I know that I generally lack the time or the skill to get good at enterprise sales. It takes a long time and a lot of effort. Also, as one open source project, again, it's hard to provide enough value to really sell at the enterprise level and get visibility with the CTO and the VPs of these big enterprises. Because again, they often though code in their day-to-day, but they're also in charge of departments and teams that are working in numerous different languages with dozens of different frameworks. So it's rare to see kind of a big enterprise where Mongoose is very prevalent. As a matter of fact, I don't think there's any enterprises like that. So I think the value that Tidelift really provides for enterprises is that, again, individual open source projects may not have much visibility at the executive level, and the kind of things that executives often care about, like licensing and security assurances. For one project, it's not very valuable. You're unlikely to be able to sell that to a big enterprise, but providing that for the whole open source supply chain is really where Tidelift shines. I think the other thing that I really like about Tidelift as a funding model as opposed to direct support is that I think Tidelift works for all projects, and in many ways it works better for smaller projects. Again, Mongoose is in kind of a unique position where Mongoose has a pretty huge feature set, and it's a pretty fundamental part of building an application. And there are people out there that think of themselves as Mongoose developers primarily. But so a direct support tier can work well for Mongoose, but what about, say, a small polyfill for a new JavaScript string method, or some small linter tool that fixes one small linting issue that's not included in a project like ESLint? You're unlikely to be able to offer a paid support tier for that. But on the other hand, for these kind of small micro open source projects, Tidelift still works, and maybe even works better because those projects are typically used by in more code bases. And Mongoose is used when people use Mongoose, they use Mongoose a lot. And they often think of themselves as Mongoose developers first. But on the other hand, if you're not going to think of yourself as a developer of this small string polyfill, but more projects are more likely to use that string polyfill. So that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for listening.